Welcome all to the University of Arizona Museum of Art's Thursday at Home, Picturing 2020 Virtual Art Talk, Students at Work. My name is Chelsea Farrar, and I'm the Curator of Community Engagement here at the U of A Museum of Art. And thank you all so much for being here today. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge that the University of Arizona sits on the homelands of Indigenous peoples who have stewarded this land since time immemorial, including the Tohono O'odham and Pascua Yaqui, and we recognize the 22 sovereign nations of what is now called Arizona. Aligning with the university's core value of a diverse and inclusive community, it is our responsibility to recognize and acknowledge the people, culture, and history that make up the Wildcat community. At the institutional level, we must be proactive in broadening awareness throughout campus and beyond to ensure that our students feel represented and valued. And in this virtual format, I know that many of our guests here today are joining us from across the United States and maybe even beyond. So I encourage you to learn what Indigenous lands you currently inhabit. And again, welcome to everyone. It's always really nice to see where folks are joining us from. So in the chat, if you want to comment about what city or state you're currently in, it would be great to see where you're all joining us. And thanks again for joining us here today. I'd like to introduce you before we start to one of our staff members who is in these sessions in our public programs every time behind the scenes, helping to make these programs possible for our campus, for our community, including, of course, our students and members. Natasha Allen is the museum's coordinator for members and donors. Natasha, how are you doing tonight?
Great, thanks, Chelsea. Hi, everyone. I'm really excited, like you all, for tonight's talk. But before it begins, I have to give a huge thank you to our museum members. Your incredible support allows us to bring amazing events and programs just like this one to the public. If you're not a member, I only ask one thing. If you appreciate tonight's talk, if you learned something, or if you just enjoy some engaging dialogue, that you'll consider becoming a member or donate to our Education Assistance Fund, so that we can continue bringing you guys amazing content just like tonight. I will put the link to donate in the chat later on tonight. Also, I wanted to talk about some cool events that we do have coming up, some that will be exclusively for members, so it's a great time to become a member. So on March 1st, we have our members only talk, which will be given by our very own Chelsea, and I guarantee you guys will not want to miss that. And then on March 11th, another part of this series, our Thursday at Home virtual talk, at 5 p.m. we'll have another event on March 11th. So I look forward to seeing you all at those events. And like I said, again, I will put the link to donate in the chat later on.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Natasha.
Of course.
And just a little reminder, because we have so many people joining us here today, it's always, if you start to notice a little bit of issues with connection, what you can do is if folks turn off their video in Zoom, it opens up some bandwidth for other folks. And we do want to have a conversation here today with our speakers, with our student artists. And so you'll notice the chat button at the bottom of your Zoom window, so you can offer any comments or questions at any time. And of course, those that are joining us on our Facebook page, you can enter any comments onto the Facebook page, and we'll migrate those over here into Zoom. So our talk today includes 3 current or recent U of A students. The U of A Museum of Art's first mission is to serve our campus community, including our faculty, staff, and of course our students. And we at the museum wanted to also highlight other incredible programs here on campus that even before COVID-19 have been working to offer direct service to thousands of students each week. Bridget Knob is our special guest today. She is the coordinator for the U of A Campus Pantry, and she's here today to tell us a little bit more about what they do and how they are a resource for our students and even faculty and staff this past year.
Perfect. Thank you, Chelsea. And thank you, everybody, for being here and having me talk. So like Chelsea mentioned, my name's Bridget. I am the coordinator of the University of Arizona Campus Pantry. We are a supplemental grocery program that provides food to students, faculty, and staff who are experiencing food insecurity on our University of Arizona community. So when we talk about food insecurity, food access could look different for everybody. We often think of this as financial access, which is a very big part, especially for college students, but we can't neglect transportation, culturally nourishing foods, having proper cooking equipment, materials, or the skills, knowledge, and time to prepare full meals. So we try to come in and support students in that way, most often by giving them groceries so they can go home and take those items to make meals out of that. We do see a lot of students who are also in need of items such as like pots and pans. So we try to connect them with resources either in the community or on our campus that can give them those items so they can cook healthy meals. There's a lot of different ways that you can support our organization. As Chelsea mentioned, pre-COVID, we served about 1,050 students per week. Right now, we're still experiencing about 700 to 750 visits per week, which is pretty substantial given how few students are actually back in Tucson right now. So we do expect that the number will bump back up once we are fully back into on-person classes, or back into in-person classes rather. But we also see that during this time of COVID, we had a big increase of facility staff, union staff, kitchen staff, janitorial staff, cleaning staff, who had shortened work hours, layoffs, etc., who are in need of our services. Sometimes they're also the only person in their family who are working now. And so they're still a wildcat in our hearts. And so that's why we still support them. So different ways that you can help, of course, donating to our program. We are completely student run and completely funded off of donations, both in kind and monetary donations. If you're interested in supporting us, Willow's going to be putting in the chat our website. On there, you can find a tab that says donate, and you can donate monetarily online since we have a lot of folks who are not local. If you are local and are interested in donated in-kind donations, at any time the Student Union Info Desk is open, and they're open every day, you can drop off donations. Some of the items that we are the most in need of right now is baking mixes, seasonings, hearty cans of soup, and cereal boxes. So the info desk is located in the Student Union directly across from the bookstore. And then also, if you are vaccinated or feel comfortable coming to campus, we are always looking for volunteers, and we will be throughout the summer into next fall. So you can email us anytime at uofacampuspantry@gmail.com to sign up for an orientation and to volunteer with us.
Thank you so much, Bridget. I think often people just don't realize the need that is actually there on our campus, and even before the pandemic. So thank you so much for doing what you do and for sharing some information for our visitors today. And I highly encourage all of you today that if you find yourself in need, reach out to the student pantry, and if you are in a place where you can give of your time or your financial resources as well. This past year has been exponentially difficult for many folks here on campus, students, faculty, staff included. And it reminds me of the quote by Audre Lorde, who said, "There's no such thing as a single issue struggle." So there have been multiple struggles that people have been facing, and being able to eat definitely should not be one of those struggles. So if you're in a place to donate, definitely please do. Students and staff here on campus are responding to these struggles in creative and powerful ways. Tonight's program, Picturing 2020 Students at Work, is part of the spring's series of programs highlighting artists from the museum's online community exhibition, Picturing 2020, A Community Reflects. If you haven't seen this exhibition, I really encourage you to explore the online gallery. Over 100 artists from Pima County submitted work this last year to this incredible community exhibition, where we asked them to reflect on what the year 2020 has meant to them. 3 of those artists are joining us here tonight, and I'm so excited and so honored to include them, to have them included in the exhibition and have them part of the speaker series. And I think Willa is going to drop in the chat the link to the online exhibition. Thank you, Willa. So if you haven't seen the exhibition or seen any of these artists' work yet, you can explore that gallery simultaneously or after the program. So without further ado, I want to introduce our three speakers tonight. Fabiola Bedoya was born in Mexico and raised in Tucson, Arizona, where she currently resides. She studied interior design at Pima Community College in Tucson and earned her BFA in photography, video, and imaging from the University of Arizona, and was recently graduating this last December. So huge congratulations to you, Fabiola. And she is best known for her highly saturated, colorful still life photography, where she encapsulates everyday objects in quirky situations. Daniel Maxwell is a California-born visual artist working in 2D media. Maxwell has lived in Arizona since the age of 10. He received his Bachelor of Fine Arts from the Arizona State University and currently resides in Tucson, where he's pursuing a Master of Fine Arts at the University of Arizona. In his work, Maxwell is driven by the compulsion to make, translating both the everyday and the ethereal into his drawings. And Joanna E. Sanchez-Avila is a Hondureña Americana, Honduran American from South Central Los Angeles, California. She sees the merit in storytelling across different genres and forms and values the radical potentials of narrating both our individual and collective life experiences, therefore investing her expertise in creative tools and resources for people to tell their stories. As a PhD candidate in rhetoric, composition, and the teaching of English at the University of Arizona, she examines how Hondurans and Honduran Americans create, produce, and enact their identities transnationally through multimodal forms and practices of remembering, such as food, music, poetry, life writing, and photography. Welcome all three of these incredible artists, students, speakers. Really excited to have you all join us tonight. And so I believe, Fabiola, you were going to speak first and share a little bit about your work. Yeah, Fabiola, I welcome you to the stage, so to speak. Oh no. All right. Let's see. Need to unmute. Chris, can you make sure that Fabiola is still a co-host?
There we go.
Awesome.
Okay, so hello everyone. My name is, again, Fabiola Bedoya. I guess I'm just gonna go ahead and just talk about my work in general of what I do. When it comes to the particular piece that I had in this show, it actually was part of a capstone class project that I had to do. So this ended up being right in the middle of when the pandemic hit. I ended up, before it hit, I had to, kind of go through to try to analyze what it was that I wanted to process as a capstone project. And that totally took like a 180 once the pandemic hit and I was stuck inside the house. So my process while the pandemic was going on was to just use what I had to my advantage and just use my own home, which is kind of what relates to the overall piece that came up. So I guess I'm gonna go ahead and, if you haven't taken a look, here's the piece that I created. It looks a little bit different since I did edit the color a little bit, but my process usually ends up being that I take these everyday items, I like to completely cover them in paint to kind of give them new life, new meaning, kind of connect it back to like, childhood days. And I kind of just like to put them down in like a home setting nowadays because it has a lot of connection to what I wrote about my piece itself. Yeah, that's a pretty good summary of like my piece in general.
Fantastic. And before we offer Daniel a chance to speak, is there anything else that you wanted to talk about your work or process this year beyond the piece that was in the exhibition?
In general, this past year has just been like a way to reconnect to who I am and process things that were still hanging on to me from when I was a child. And I had to just process it all during a pandemic. So it was just a matter of just like really truly tapping into why I am the way I am, why I do the things I do, and kind of like putting that out into my work now.
Beautiful. Fantastic. Thank you so much, Fabiola.
Thanks.
All right. And I believe Daniel Maxwell is next up to share a little bit about his work and process this year.
So I'm kind of fighting with the sun here, everybody. Go ahead and get started. Can we all see my screen? Is it all working? Okay. So hello, my name is Daniel Maxwell. I'm an MFA here at UA. I'm actually in my 3rd year now in the 2D program. I graduate in a couple months, so I'm getting pretty excited about that. But yeah, this was the piece I submitted to the Picturing 2020 show. I titled it Empty Chairs. And I wrote an artist statement, or kind of statement that kind of went with it for the submission. And I'm going to read it because I think it kind of explains my position with this drawing really well, and kind of will help establish my position to kind of explain it. Okay. I've always found myself intrigued by abandoned spaces of community engagement. The digital disorder draws me in, and I can only explain this magnetism to social leftovers through my own introverted tendencies. Now, however, I find myself mourning these empty scenes of communication and interaction and all the moments that we've lost to this pandemic. These empty chairs imply conversations never had, the memory of embracing friends and family, or just simply sharing 6 feet of space, which seems so strangely intimate now. So this image, the reference actually comes from the Graduate Studio. It was taken just moments after one of my peers had finished his thesis review back in spring 2020. So before we came into lockdown, like a couple weeks before, just before. So when I took this photo, I wasn't really considering pandemic. I wasn't considering no meetings. I wasn't considering the lockdown. Like none of that was really in my mental vocabulary, in my mind. I was just kind of drawn to this scene of like these chairs are almost still communicating. There's almost this presence of the meeting, like still in the scene. You know, it's just moments. I could literally still hear the professors and my peer like walking through the hallway. But there was just something left over that I was just drawn to. So I took that photo. But when I read the call for this show, Picturing 2020, right away, this image came to mind, just because I was thinking about the rest of my own graduate career, not having these meetings anymore. Like, you know, these are pretty high-minded meetings. It's thesis review. It's talking about art and creativity. There are 5 professors in a room with you. You know, it's pretty intense, and it's why we signed up. And now it's all done via Zoom. So, you know, it just right away I made the visual connection to this piece. And at the same time I drew this piece, I was working on this other piece I titled Empty Recliner, kind of in the same realm of these empty chairs. But, you know, empty chairs is a very well-established metaphor of grief and mourning. It's not something I came up with. I'm very aware of that. You know, I think of Doris Salcito's 1600 chairs in Istanbul. I think of Les Miserables. The Marius's solo is Empty Chairs, Empty Tables. And October 5th, 2020, there's 20,000 empty chairs on the White House lawn to commemorate the 200,000 people who had passed away at that point. So I'm really kind of attaching into an already well-established metaphor, but it just seemed to really kind of resonate with me. A little backstory about the summer of 2020, and also received a Medici Scholar Grant to enroll in the Death Doula Certificate Program with the NELDA, or the International End of Life Doula Association, which is a little strange, kind of an outside of the box thing to get a grant for. But because of the pandemic, Medici grant's normally a travel grant. Because of the pandemic, the parameters for the grant opened up to be a lot more about like online certificate programs, and it just opened up the window for me to kind of slide in there to get the grant for this certificate program. So while I was a 28-hour Zoom certificate program online, while I was going on doing that, I was working on these pieces as well. And one of the first things I learned in NELDA is that a lot of people in end of life care spend a lot of time in recliners, and a lot of people who have this privilege of having a doula or a death doula be there present with them, because a death doula essentially comes in during the dying process and just assist with the emotional, the physical. They're kind of just there for the dying person and the family, not necessarily as a grief counselor, more as just like they're there. So it just kind of resonated with me. As the summer progressed in Tucson, I kept seeing recliners coming to curbsides, and I kept seeing chairs leaving homes. And that's a really normal thing in Tucson. If you lived here a long time, you know, people move around a lot. It's happening in my neighborhood right now, but, you know, a bunch of chairs and furniture. But I couldn't help but associate every time I saw a recliner with grief and with loss. So that's kind of where this came from. But a little backstory about why I would enroll in a death doula certificate program anyway in my master's degree is, since I've been here, my work, my research has been around grief and mourning and loss, stemming from losing my father suddenly when I was 21. It just kind of resonated with me. So I've been in this realm of grief work for over a decade now. So it made a lot of sense for me just to quickly, you know, resonate with my work and turn what's happening into an image. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Stop sharing. Thank you.
Incredibly powerful. Thank you, Daniel, for sharing that. Yeah, it sounds like you were in some ways good and bad, really primed for this time right now, and at least it positioned you in a place that you were in a place to process it, probably from a healthy position. Yeah, fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing. And I know, I just want to remind people again that please add comments or questions into the Zoom chat, and we'll be saving time for more of a conversation with our three speakers at the end. And if you're on Facebook, you can do the same. And I know there was a question about seeing some of the work. So I'm going to offer Joanna to speak first, and then we can share some of the images that you didn't get to see. So Joanna.
Hola, hola. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for being here. I will be having a little PowerPoint here to talk to you. So I want to provide some context in terms of the piece that got accepted. Right now, I'm transmitting live from Tongva Lands, which is South Central Los Angeles, California. And I want to honor those ancestral knowledges of the space I'm currently occupying. So Dark's ethos is something that I explore as a PhD student in my graduate work as a candidate. One of my chapters is looking at the idea of identity in Central American diaspora. So one thing that I want to talk to you about today is Central American resiliency and memory, and how that influenced insidious justice, which was one of the pieces selected for Picturing 2020. And again, thank you to everyone who's helped organize this event, and for those of you present today. Some of the pictures you'll see right now are pictures and images that evoked a lot of emotions that went into insidious justice and any of the other work that I've created since then. And these are photojournalist images that represent Central American migrants within the last 2 to 3 years. So one image that really hit home for me was this one, and maybe some of you have seen it, which was a crying girl in at the border while the mom is being detained. And this image is really powerful in and of itself, but also it felt very personal because as a Honduran American, I ended up finding out that her cultural background is of Honduran descent as well. So thinking about the powerful evoking images that also represented, you know, children in cages. And again, as a person who studies language in a multimodal manner, in this case, the visual, I always was called to ask questions like, who are these children? Why do we just say children in cages? Versus asking more context questions, right? So for me, I became interested in understanding the gaze of the photojournalist. What happens to the subject, right? Sometimes these photojournalists go on to win amazing awards. They advance in their careers, but then again, what happens to the subjects? And also thinking too of the ways that sometimes a photojournalist capture migrant caravans. So we move from like individual children to more massive groups and movement in that sense. So for me, it was also examining and dealing with the emotions of trauma, but also like where can I help instead of feeling helpless? Because here as a Honduran American, representation was powerful. Like, yes, people now know where Honduras is. They won't ask me Honduras, what part of Mexico is that at? But it also highlighted such images, the hyper militarization of various borders, the resiliency of Central American migrants, Honduran people, thinking of the geographical space of Honduras. Folks got across 2 to 3 borders, the Guatemala-Mexico one, and then Mexico, the US when they come here, right? So again, thinking about the various challenges that folks are facing, not just in the journey in and of itself, but also thinking what are the factors that contribute this journey to begin with? So in the context of Honduras, looking at the history of the politics, the policies, right? The Honduran government's politics and government, US intervention and imperialism in Honduras historically, not just recently, but in the past as well, in the past 20, 30 years, but also thinking about the impacts of the global climate crisis. Again, lack of access to lands and resources, disappearances of indigenous land defenders, disappearances of activists who are fighting for like equitable rights to, you know, based on their gender expression. So again, all of these things were like just emotions and ideas that I felt were really impactful and powerful that influenced my own sense of anger and rage, but also helplessness because I am, you know, US born. I also am complicit in some of the things based on my own migration story results. So again, my migration stories is my parents, right? So I'm a result of that. So thinking of all these things influence insidious justice. And just to let you know, again, on text, like mass media and the consumption of Central American migrants from being photographed to consuming that, thinking of the politics when 45's presidency and administration in the US created a lot of chaos from folks already being in the US to having temporary protective status to, you know, the public mass of deportations to the Remain in Mexico policy, which impacted asylum. Because I know when I was a student in Tucson, there's a lot of opportunities to help migrants who get recently released from detentions. But when Remain in Mexico policy happened, I felt helpless. I'm like, where can I help? There's nobody here, right? Because they're at the border. So thinking of those little moments, the global climate crisis, you know, it's not just abroad away from us. I'm here thinking of my loved ones who are in Texas right now, who, you know, had suggested, hey, I would love to come, but we don't have power, or it's limited, or it's cold. So again, thinking about that. Obviously, COVID pandemic and the way that our governments took a while to respond to it. So thinking of our new realities, and the highlight and embracing and activation of mutual aid and grassroots organizing again, which is something that has been around for like a long time. But again, it came back from seeing GoFundMe pages to seeing local folks saying, hey, I'm organizing this fundraiser to buy things to help people. So again, these are ideas that inform this image. And it was really powerful to see where my image was ended up being categorized in terms of shifting realities. So I feel like as I conceptualize ideas for my own dissertation and intellectual work on Dark's ethos and what does it mean to be Honduran American, this kind of enforced and allowed me an opportunity to play with that. Insidious justice emerged for me from feeling like I love art. I love creating when I don't know how to articulate my emotions. I don't know how to release all this energy. So playing with textiles, creating things, crafting, that kind of moves me to channel that energy, that anger, that rage into that. So again, this is playing with a lot of symbology. There's religious aspects to it, but there's also the idea of textuality, playing with touching things. In this case, I think of the fabric and the composition with that, the color as well. I use myself as subject, but again, an imaginative subject. My previous work was also exploring textuality, but also the relationship humans have with their animals. In this case, I photographed my sibling holding her dog. So again, what does that mean to have different forms of intimacy at times where we want to belong in bigger, massive global scales, but also are limited to our own little circles? And then again, thinking of uncertainty, I have this one entitled, but I was playing with the idea of excess and darkness, and how even in uncertainty and distortion, there's still power and hope to create and imagine anew. So these images are all influenced by the emotional bearing witness that photojournalists provided about something that's personal to me, which is belonging amongst Central Americanness. When I'm thinking of further work, again, my main role is as a scholar artist. When I create, I think about other areas that are more exploratory of this concept that I'm playing with called Dark's ethos. So here is an image called Provocation, which I made this month on fat erotics. So again, exploring what it means to have fat bodies, to have explorations of erotics that at times are deemed just to the sexual. And as we know, Audre Lorde's uses of the erotic, it's beyond that. So that's something I'm interested in exploring further. Another project that I want to examine or create is autogeographic memoryscapes. So thinking about how do bodies like my own take up public spaces as Central Americans, in this case in South Central LA and also in Tucson, Arizona. So my idea for that is to publish a zine that's mostly visualized, but also in conversation and collaboration with other artists. And, you know, thinking in mind that for me, if I rise up, I bring community with me. I do want to give some shout outs to Central American visual artists and cultural makers. First off, Central American Twitter, I feel like that hashtag created an opportunity for digital spaces of diaspora to emerge. Reeb Menjivar, Jazz Diaz, Rebecca and Ursula Recinos, the sister Kokoro, Tanya Flores Hodgson, Jorge Guerra del Cid, Jaime Mejia Mayorga, who was in Honduras doing mutual work when Hurricane Iota and Ida hit in November. Major shout outs to you. I couldn't have done this without my talented, you know, black and white photography, film sister, Roxana Sanchez-Avila, who helped edit the image. And obviously with blessed family and chosen fam, without your support, you know, you being here and even listening to my ideas, I couldn't produce. But thank you so very much for your time. If you have questions, feel free to engage me on here as we open up to Q&A or in the chat. But thank you so much for your time.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Joanna. That was fantastic. And I'm sure you saw in the chat a lot of snaps and a lot of touchstones that you touched upon. Really beautiful. So really quick, before we jump into a conversation, I want to quickly share Fabiola's image that is in the exhibition. And I think it's really important that you all see the object that Fabiola shared at the beginning into the final photograph. And while I was hearing Joanna speak, and after Fabiola, you spoke, I see so many beautiful connections and through lines between the two of you and your work. This idea of like mentioning like things being tangible and taking the object and the objects that you have access to in a time that we don't we didn't have easy access to go and get art materials, right? We had to use what we had last spring, especially. And these ideas of how can we take these traumas that we have that are either generational or personal, and visualize them. And you each have done that in these really beautiful ways, and obviously ending in photography as a similar media as well. Some really beautiful through lines that I see between the two of you and your work. So if you haven't seen any of their work on the exhibition page, I definitely invite you all to check that out. So I want to make sure that I saw a question in the chat of wanting to see this image. Fantastic. So before we open it up to those in the room, so to speak, and if you have questions, please definitely populate them in the chat. I have some questions for you all first. Yeah, so I guess my first question for all of you is beginning in the March of last year, 2020, which is, it is surreal to think that is basically almost a year from now. Last year, a lot of students found themselves really disconnected from our regular sources of support. So be that actual shelter, our friends, family, work, studio spaces, and maybe even healthcare. So can each of you speak to the ways in which you found yourself reaching out to resources on or off campus, or you found yourself trying to help provide those resources, offering mutual aid for others? And maybe we'll work backwards, and if maybe Joanna wants to speak first.
Thank you for posing that question. Yes, I'm thinking of the various ways of mutual aid. Even when it happened on campus, I was thinking of myself as a student, and the uncertainty as a graduate student. I know a lot of folks were like, you need to graduate soon because this program's running out of funding and we won't be able to hold you another year, right? So thinking, oh my God, what does that mean? I won't eat for a month because I need to save up for the future? Like, what's going on, So again, for me, I was thinking strategically. I believe in the powerful thing of informed participation. So I'm like, I love researching. If my friends who are on here will tell you, I'm very resourceful. I'm like, hey, here's a link. Have you checked that out? Or I saw this and thought of you. So for me, it was important to be aware of what was available within the campus, but also those resources that could spread back out into the community who's like non-U of A affiliated, right? Because I feel sometimes that becomes a gatekeeping kind of sense when it comes to not sharing resources. And then in the broader scope, I'm thinking about Jaime, who's here. When Hurricane Eta and Iota happened in Honduras, he was on the ground, and I was like, what can I do? Like what it was. And for me, Instagram was a platform where I was able to share information that was not completely live in terms of the news when that happened, but rather like I have someone on the ground providing support to folks. Let's see how we open the channels to create bigger, right, aspects. So that was important in terms of helping give aid out and receiving it for myself. I feel like it was more my friends loving me. Like that was powerful for me, at least. I think you're muted.
Thank you. Yes, so that last part that you touch upon, I think is really important, right? As, us seeking, remembering to seek that love and care from those that know us best is really important. Awesome. And Daniel, how about you? Was there places that you were seeking support or able to offer support this past year?
I didn't hesitate to send my students to CAPS. You know, I almost had that link like copy pasted like daily. Because it was a hard time for all of us. You know, I even called them one day and just chatted with them because I was having a hard time. So, you know, I think CAPS does a great job on campus offering mental health checkups and mental health check-ins to students, and they even offered like a COVID support group. And so I think there's, you know, the school is pretty active in trying to provide assistance for our students. And I teach primarily undergrads, well, all undergrads, but primarily like freshman undergrads. So, you know, it's a whole kind of shock for them, let alone coming into college, but now in this situation too. So yeah, I even have it in my syllabus. You know, I remind them daily, like having trouble, just call this number, check them out. Yeah, so that's something I've been doing pretty frequently in my courses.
Yeah, that's a really important and critical one. That is, I was teaching last spring, I also used as a resource for myself and for students. Awesome. And Fabiola, how about you?
Overall, I made sure that I was just seeking support from other students since we were going through everything together. We kind of made like Instagram groups to kind of still keep together as a community and interact and just share our everyday life and struggle. Other than that, I just reached out to like the local creative community in Tucson. It's amazing, and they were able to help us as students by being able to like promote the BFA and MFA shows. So I just did what I could electronically online, and just I think that really helped through everything, just keeping together with the other students because we were all processing through it in general. But other than that, I mean, I was still working, I was still doing my normal life, so that was the best I could do.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. I think that's really important, remembering like that students were going through this together, and sometimes the people that are able to support you the best know your situation the best. And so hearing that students were supporting each other is really wonderful to hear. And you had another, I think this kind of is a nice segue into another project that you started doing over COVID of offering like resourceful ways of creativity through thrift store purchases. Do you want to share a little bit more about that?
The videos I made with like thrifting gifts for other people. I mean, overall, I'm a thrifty person. I like to make sure that, you know, things that I give are very intentional and that I don't want it to be just like something that you use and throw away. So I wanted to make a bunch of videos for the holiday season to be able to put together really meaningful gifts and just make it sustainable, especially nowadays since there's so much fast fashion, you know, like fast art in general. Like people will just rather go out and purchase like a piece of art from Target instead of sourcing locally in the community. So yeah.
Thank you. And if is that still on your Instagram page that you're sharing that if people wanted to learn more about it?
Yeah, so I have it as part of my Instagram, and now I'm currently working for the nonprofit that I was kind of helping do the videos for. So it's a really nice like way that I was just giving back just because I loved doing it, and that's who I am. But now to be able to have the opportunity to work in that area is just amazing.
That's awesome. That's really cool. That's awesome. And how about maybe for Daniel and Joanna, like the pandemic obviously was impacting so many different parts of our lives this year. So Fabiola shared a little bit about how like she was responding through her art making. If each of you can maybe talk a little bit about how the past year has impacted or changed the way you're creating your creative practice. How about Daniel? Do you want to go first?
Okay. So I draw because it's adaptive. It's why I've made drawing kind of my established form of art, rather than painting or going further into something that takes a lot more material. Like I could draw with a napkin and a crayon, you know what I mean? It's super accessible, which is why I've always done it. So pandemic hit and, our studios closed down, which was a pretty big hit to me. I was working on a big drawing, I can't bring this home. But as far as just getting going and keeping my discipline, I don't really have too much of a hiccup, my issues don't involve things that sculptures issues do, or people that need wood shops, or most of my activity can be done at home. So I was able to kind of keep my discipline going, but definitely being locked out of our studio for quite a while. All summer we were out of it, and then we got it back in the beginning of the semester, but then the winter break, they closed it down again for cleaning and to give the custodial staff a break, which is excellent. I wish they would close it down longer, so just make us adapt further. But I don't know. And as it stands now, the studio is open, but I've been an isolationist, kind of an introvert my whole life anyway. Now I'm kind of a vampire. Like I literally go to my studio at midnight and I work till 5 a.m, and then I go home just so I don't interact with anybody. So I don't, just to make it simple, keep me safe, keep them safe. It's a shared space. So it's completely affected the way I make art, but you just gotta be adaptive and keep going.
Thank you. And John, how about you?
Thank you. Yeah, I think it impacted my art practice in terms of making it relational. I was thinking about, I take a lot of selfies. I love fashion as well. Usually I use Instagram as an archive of my fashion. So once that we were, in quarantine, we weren't really allowed to go out. At least I was trying to be responsible. Like, I'm not going to go out and show off my outfit. But it was a matter of like, oh yeah, how do I keep creating? And I think using myself as text through, using a tripod and self-timer was interesting in creating and just exploring my own ideas, my own connection to my body. But also I was thinking like snail mail. I love sending out mail to my friends. And I feel like that hit 2 birds with 1 stone. And no, I'm not advocating. I know that's just a idiom, but, advocating animal abuse. But the idiom of like, I was able to connect with my friends across the US. I was able to work towards financially helping USPS stay afloat, right? Because USPS was being underfunded. We were having so many issues happening with, again, the lack of government intervention for a positive resource. So for me, I love just collecting and going through my own archives of collection and sending them out to friends and having little packages. Again, thinking about how to create relationalities, because even writing positive notes at a time where we feel so isolated can be helpful, because I post a lot on Instagram, but some folks do get overwhelmed with the online presence and the digital reliance of connection through there. So for me, I was just thinking about that, because I think one of the things I did was I ended up going to like CVS to print out my pictures 4x6 for the Insidious Justice, and I mailed it out to friends. I'm like, hey, here's your girl. Hope you're having a good day, So I think for me, that's what I was thinking of, circulation as a gift to reconnect and show appreciation to folks.
That's amazing. And yeah, a shout out to US Postal Service for sure. I found myself mailing things, and I haven't sent a letter for years, and I was really getting into milling zines, handmade zines to friends and family as well. Fantastic. Thank you so much for that. So maybe one last question that I have for you, and then I know there's a lot of comments and questions in the chat that I want to get to. So yeah, like you all have been through this past year. Fabiola, you have graduated this past year. It's clear you all have had like a various range in experiences, some within the School of Art and some outside of the School of Art, on campus, off campus, in the state of Arizona, outside of the state of Arizona. So it's really fantastic to have really these diverse perspectives and experiences that you all offer today. So I was hoping that you maybe can offer some advice for artists and students who are still trying to navigate this new reality. Fabiola, do you want to offer up some advice first?
Well, general advice, since, I mean, coming from my perspective, like I was a student, mom, and I was working through everything. I pretty much didn't have time to sit and process anything. I just had to turn all those like negative things that I was going through into like positives. Ultimately, like you have to check in with yourself and realize, hey, I'm not okay. What do I need to be okay? Maybe it's just like a quick break from what you're working on, stepping outside into nature. But I guess for me personally, it came from just recognizing that I wasn't okay. So I would just write my feelings down, honestly. Try to process why I was feeling that and turn it into something positive by making little bits of art or video art. So just really tune into yourself and give yourself the time to like tune out of everything.
Delicate balance of tuning in and tuning out. Yeah. Thank you, Fabiola. Daniel, how about you?
Yeah, I agree with Fabiola, kind of mirroring her, like be okay that you're not okay. And some days, you know, I'm in the MFA, so there's a pressure on us to produce. This is like, we are supposed to be the art machines, right? Like, but it, you know, I talk to my fellow grads too. It's okay that if you take a day to just recoup and take some time. And I felt like when the pandemic started, everybody was like, okay, here's my 2-month plan to learn how to do this. And, you know, I was shaking my head then. I'm still shaking my head now. Like, this isn't necessarily the time to become ultra creatives, right? But as far as like keeping your artistic discipline going for creatives, I mean, you just got to persevere. You got to keep going. You know, that's with every challenge in life. But, you know, maybe now's a good time to draw. It's a good time to learn how to draw. We can all be at home drawing. That's my advice. Learn to draw.
From one art educator to another, I love that advice. Drawing is a great way to force yourself to slow down. But I also have to add with that is that drawing doesn't mean drawing realistically, right? It's just drawing. Making marks can be really therapeutic. Yeah, great. And Joanna, how about you?
I always advocate, I think I come from a different perspective. There's times I struggle, I'm like, I'm not an artist, I just exist and I just do. But I think having that introspective moment, I think to feel comfortable, to engage, right, in the act of creating, I think it's a powerful thing. And surrounding yourself with supportive folks who either give you the resources or the tools or the opportunities to create, I think that matters. I think about how the pandemic impacted Roxana, who's a photographer, a film photographer, and she needs space outside of the home to create. So again, like trying to be encouraging of her, like, have you like outlined an idea, or just having conversations and dialogue. And also like the artist friends who are present in the participants, realm right now, audience members, like just listening to them, breaking bread. I think for me, I love inspiring and pushing people's well-being by just having conversations and like asking what brought you joy today. What was one thing you taught your kids, especially the art educators in here. And I think having support like that is important, to fuel that fire and that passion, which is medicine I need to take because I'm in a more prioritized perspective. Like Daniel mentioned, the grad student asking to produce. I'm asked to produce writings. I struggle with that. My dissertation advisor is here. Shout out Dr. Cardenas, who's like, where's the chapter? Or let's work through this chapter. So again, working through that. But I think having the support and people to listen is important and to engage in dialogue with you.
Fantastic. And I think we're all here bearing witness that your chapter is here. You just articulated and visually demonstrated it. So we can offer a witness to that testimonial for sure. Well, there's some, I know I have lots of other questions that I would love to share, but I want to offer up just a little bit of time left for folks in the room, and we might go a little bit over 5 o'clock if there's some questions that people really want to ask. First of all, I saw that Jaime offered a great resource in the chat. Thank you so much for offering that. As Joanna, I think, mentioned it. So definitely check out that really great resource. And Milo in the room wants you to mail something, Joanna, it looks like. So make sure you check out and offer up a postcard. I am just scrolling through real quick here. And Mel also offers that the art stores are empty. That means folks want and need art. It's our last true freedom. I think it's a great comment. Great suggestions for sure. Jaime also mentioned that we need to see art, how art could help us live a better life as it gives us space to vent. I agree for sure. Art therapy, yeah. And Susanna, I saw that you had a question. Do you want to leave it in the chat and I will offer it up? And Jorge, yeah, if you want to type your question in the chat, and then our speakers will either see it or I will read it out loud. Well, we're waiting for a question real quick. Oh, there we go. So for Joanna, how has South Central LA and Tucson influenced your work / identity?
Hi, Susanna. Thank you for being here. I appreciate you. Yeah, so South Central Los Angeles has been the place where I was raised, and that, impacts my identity from like being in the heart of like the hood and whatever connotations might come up with that statement. But also thinking about the changes that happened once I moved away when I went to Tucson for graduate school. I've been living in Tucson now for 6 years because I've been studying there for my PhD. And every time I come visit for the breaks, it's different. Gentrification is a politics that is happening in Tucson and in South LA. So sometimes I feel like I don't know this place anymore. And then when I'm in Tucson, I felt like I was never from there, and I'm still learning like whose ancestral lands I'm occupying, what, current histories are emerging and are there, at the moment. I always feel like I'm a floater. I just float around like a ghost. So I think those space, place, belongings and unbelongings influence the imaginative aspects of the visuality I try to create. Like, yeah, what happens if I don't have a land to claim? Where do I exist? And I feel like just by creating ideas that are so out there that people are like, it's not legible, I can't relate, I don't get it. At least it's an opportunity to begin asking questions like, yeah, why don't you get it? What's the situation there? So thinking about those open things do influence that. And the other layers of, I'm from LA, I'm Honduran American, what does else that mean? Because LA has a different sometimes vibe or imagination exists differently in people's imaginaries. But yeah, thank you for your question, and I hope that answers it. If not, hit me up in the DMs.
I think like this idea of like not feeling like kind of floating between multiple spaces. I have been hearing from a lot of our international students over the last year when they, like kind of got trapped, right? Like they couldn't fly back home because they didn't know if they could come back to campus, and they were just kind of like this in between place. I know a lot of folks on campus can definitely relate to that feeling for sure, and possibly other folks in the room. So another question for you from Jorge said, do you at all feel as if you are an artist / academic of exile, writing about Central Americanist Honduran identity mixed in with South Central upbringing in Tucson? As you know, I am a South Central Guatemalan baby, and this pandemic had me confronting this question in my own unique turf.
Hey, Boo. Thank you for asking that, Jorge. Yes, I mentioned like friends loving me in Tucson. Like I have some beautiful, lovely, presence here, like Sophia and all these other folks that I don't want to name drop because then I might forget, don't feel left out. But again, people from other Latin American backgrounds who support me and are part of my community. Because if anything, I'd be like, I want a whole crew of Central Americans. Like this is the Central American artist crew of Tucson, right? But it's not there. We're scattered. Some of us, for whatever reasons, don't openly embrace that identity, or others do openly embrace it, but are spread out in other areas. So sometimes I feel an in-betweenness, not a complete exile per se. I think academia creates its own gatekeeping to exile people. But when it comes to existing as an artist, I feel like I get an opportunity there in that opaqueness to create. And I don't know if Fabiola and Daniel can, even speak about like, yeah, what happens when some of the communities you want to be part of don't, immediately read you as one of their own? How do you, respond to that? So I feel like we exist as anomalies. You just own it. A lot of people say, I love your confidence. You are whatever you want. It's not about confidence. It's just, I exist to exist. And that's just me. And I just happen to walk around and, project confidence, but it's out of the love of existing. I'm allowed to exist at the end of the day with dignity and respect.
I want to offer like all the snaps to that. Is fantastic. And Fabiola, I saw you reacting to that statement, to that question. Do you want to add anything, offer anything from your experience with that?
It's just sorry, kid. Well, yeah, like me being that I was born in Mexico with like Mexican culture on both sides of my family, but living in Tucson and grew up here, like I've always felt like I don't fit into either place. So it's I feel like I'm constantly having to prove myself to both sides, and that's like a really big struggle. But it's like now I'm just kind of taking ownership that, hey, this is who I am, and I know I'm not the only one, and I might as well uplift the ones that are there with me and try to just help them out as best I can.
I love it. The reality of Zoom life. Thank you so much, Fabiola. Yeah, I mean, especially as photographers and artists, right? This idea of the gaze that you mentioned, Joanna, really does speak to this idea of especially minoritized groups, like seeing ourselves through another person's lens constantly. And so there's power in that creativity that you were speaking of flipping that gaze and taking over that power to create for yourself, and not as a subject from another is great. And the idea of uplifting other people is beautiful, Fabiola. So we're kind of over time, but there was one last question that I wanted to share with you all that was in the chat. Now I have to go back. There's so many great questions and great comments. Was a question of, are there any artists and or aesthetics that influence your work? Daniel, do you want to speak to that? You mentioned a little bit, but maybe you want to offer a little bit more.
Oh, that's a really hard question. That's like asking what your favorite movie is for me. I'm all over the board. Like I draw, but you know, I'm interested in sculpture. I'm interested in anime. I'm interested in, you know, so my current references. I mean, I took a class with Sarah Moore and she introduced me to Thomas Cole and the whole Hudson River School. So I'm kind of stuck, right? That's where I'm focused right now. But I feel like my artistic influences kind of jump around a lot. It's a really hard question. Sorry, I don't have a better answer for you.
No, it's a real honest answer. Thank you so much. And Joanna, how about you? What are some artists and aesthetics that are influencing you?
Susie, you're one of them. Thank you for your question. Yeah, I really gain influence. I feel sometimes I get trapped by this nostalgia of like Billie Holiday in the past, but then I try to bring it back to like who's alive right now, who's in my circle of friends, and the people in my life bring me joy and inspiration, from like Susanna, who's an amazing artist, as well as Angie. I think you might still be in the room. Yes, you are. They're in a band together. So musicians, you know, my younger sister, the photographer, my mom and her fashion and style. My friends who are writers, you know, writing about Central America, and the academics in the room, you know, my friends from South Central who somehow we ended up meeting again through conferences in academia, to my like Pinay or Filipino friends who like I met in grad school. So to me, those live folks inspire me, and their aesthetics vary. They're like all over the place. Like you mentioned, like it's hard to pick a genre, you know? So I am blessed and I embrace those differences that make my life colorful. I wear a lot of black, but that's just me. I'm very darks. I love Danielle's idea of like mourning and loss. I feel like, you know, if a genre was a thing, it's like The Cure, Joy Division, sad girl stuff. But at the end of the day, it's these beautiful lights of energy through people that inspire my art practices, and, you know, just existing as a human when at times the systems of society and civilization create angst and pain and trauma.
I feel like there's like a hashtag goth life in there somewhere, right? If I could say it. Well, and Fabiola, how about you? Last question, like what artists or aesthetics have inspired you?
Honestly, it's a lot of like my Mexican culture. I spent my summers in Mexico, so surrounded by colored buildings and just like all the art and just how colorful Mexico really is. And I guess I've just taken that as a part of me since I was young.
Fantastic. And we could totally see that in those color saturated photographs for sure. Yeah. Well, I know that we have other questions and comments in the chat. Just to be respectful of our speakers' time and other folks in the room, I will share the chat with all of our speakers. And so I think some of you probably, they know some of you all, and so they can follow up with some other longer answers and comments to some really great questions and conversations that were started here. And it sounds like there's even an offer of maybe like starting a conversation about a community mural in the conversation in the chat, which I love being able to bring so many people from campus and off campus together for a really beautiful conversation. Daniel, Joanna, Fabiola, thank you for being the inspiration for this conversation and for sharing your work with us in the exhibition. Thank you so much. And Daniel, Joanna, I wish you the best of luck in finishing up your career at the university. And Fabiola, congratulations on finishing yours. And I'm super excited to see what the next chapter brings with you and your family. I'm really excited. Thank you all, everyone, for being here today. It was a fantastic conversation. It was really beautiful to have so many familiar faces and new faces join us for this Thursday art talk. And I hope that you'll join us next month as well. In fact, we'll be talking about migration stories in our April art talk. And we'll have 2 more speakers join us from Picturing 2020 next month in March. So another great season of conversations. I hope that you all can join us. And for now, I hope that you all stay safe and be well in 2021. Thank you all so much.